Well, good evening, everyone. The time is 6 o'clock and it's the 21st of July, 2020. We are ready to begin our briefing session and want to make two quick notes for some housekeeping. Councilmember Harvey is not able to join us this evening. He texted me earlier and gave me that information, so we will not be including him on a roll call for any decisions to be made. And Councilmember Jameson is having some issues with logging on. So we've actually started here at 6, but I don't want to get into any business until give Councilmember Jameson just a couple more minutes to log on. So you can all just stand by for just a couple of minutes and we'll see you give her an opportunity. At the outset also, City Attorney Shelby Piercy will be joining us. She's already online with us, but Mr. Hague will be coming on at a later time. So we are also streaming on Facebook Live for information to our citizens. So give us just another minute or two before we get started. Give Councilmember Jameson an opportunity to join us here. Well, while we're in the interim, I'll go ahead and read some of the housekeeping notices we're required to get into the record. In accordance with an order of the Office of the Governor issued March 16, 2020, as extended by the Office of the Governor on June 12, 2020, the City Council for the City of Duncanville, Texas, will conduct City Council regular meetings by video conference at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, and that will be today for July 21st. In order to advance the public health goal of limiting face-to-face meetings, also called social distancing, in an effort to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. This is an open meeting conducted by video conference. There will be no public access to a physical location. To submit public comments, citizens were invited to register and to send those comments into the City Secretary by 4 p.m. today. And according to the City Secretary, there were none submitted by that time. Would you please affirm that, City Secretary?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So at that point, when we get to that in the agenda, we will be skipping over citizen comments. And a recording of the video will be made available to the public in accordance with the Open Meetings Act upon request. Just so everyone is aware, the audience is in listen mode, and each council member, please, if you need an opportunity for you to speak, please use the raise your hand, quote unquote, raise your hand feature. It's available to you at the bottom of your screen. You can raise your hand or physically let us know that you want to say something. Kristen is usually pretty good at being able to see that happen. I'm usually not pretty good at seeing that happen, being focused on other things. So just when you want to speak, please make that known pretty visibly to us. And as I said earlier, any decisions to be made will be done by roll call vote, and City Secretary Kristen Downs will be doing those roll call votes for us. What time have we got here? 6:04. Kristen, you have any word from Councilmember Jameson yet?
There she is.
Oh, all right, there you are. Councilmember Jameson, been waiting to get started until you're able to get on. So glad to hear you. Glad to see you as well. Just so you'll know, I did announce to the others that Councilmember Harvey is unable to join us this evening. So we'll go ahead and get underway. I did call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock, Councilmember Jameson, but we haven't discussed any business wanting to wait until you're actually able to join us. So nothing has occurred since 6 o'clock. So we'll get underway with the agenda that we have. And interim city manager Paul Frederickson is online with us. And if you please discuss the consent agenda.
Yep. Yes, Mayor, members of council, we have 4 consent items for your review and approval. The first is consider minutes for the June 8th budget workshop special meeting, June 9th budget workshop special meeting, June 16th city council regular meeting, and the July 7th special meeting for your review and approval. Second item is considering a resolution for the approved shared use bike lane locations and implementation of utilizing 2018 bond funds for that project. As you recall, at your joint meeting in February with the Parks Board, you established a map of the shared use lanes, creating a trail loop within the city of Duncanville. At your budget workshop on the 9th, council asked to add the Cockrell Hill Road and Wintergreen Avenue of the Stars as an additional shared use bike lane as part of the system for your approval. In order to implement the signage and to identify these shared bike lanes, it will cost approximately $50,000. Another important note to that is that though that information will also be shared with a consultant working with the North Central Texas Council of Governments as they update the VeloWeb as far as the system for the region-wide project. The second item is for contract paving markings with the Elite Striping group for an amount not to exceed $112,000. This item is being brought back before the City Council. It did come to Council in May of 2020. Unfortunately, it was discovered that in the contract, there was not a renewal provision included in that part of the contract. So that was added, which also which caused us to then go out and rebid this item as well. The same company came in, Elite Striping LLC, with a winning bid for that particular project. This is for adding basically pavement markings, thermoplastic markings, and additional road marking devices for our road system. And item D is a resolution for a purchase agreement with Sandpack Ford using both the buy board contract and also Tarrant County Commissioner's contract for heavy duty fleet equipment replacement. On the buy board, we're utilizing buy board for one F-450, and then using the Tarrant County agreement, we're able to purchase 3 vehicles, 1 F-250 and 2 F-350s, utilizing the best prices out of those contracts. Sandpack is the vendor for both of those with the best prices for those vehicles. And that is concludes my report for the consent agenda items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frederickson, for that. Okay, well, moving on to item number 2 for our work session, and that is briefings and presentations. And item number 2A is receive a presentation from Jason Hughes with Hilltop Securities, and he's going to give us an education discussion on public improvement districts, or PIDs. And this was added to our agenda for an item by Councilmember Cooks. So, Mr. Hughes, if you're there, please, please come on.
Let me just council real quick, just as a reminder, this was an item that was on the listed on the council agenda for your June budget workshop for the 9th. You were not able to get to that item, so this is being pushed forward to this particular agenda item, and I'm going to let also Jessica introduce this briefing item.
Okay.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. As the Mayor stated, Jason Hughes is with us this evening with Hilltop Securities. As we discussed previously, or started to discuss, there was a council member that wanted to have some additional information on PIDs and how other best Southwest cities are utilizing this financing tool. So with that, I'll go ahead and let Jason take over, and we'll go from there.
All right, Jessica, thank you. Mayor, Council, it's good to be with you again tonight. And you should have a presentation over public improvement districts. And what I thought I would do is go through the first couple of pages and just give kind of a high level summary. And then I'll drill down a little bit further and kind of talk about some of the details. So certainly as I'm going through this, if there's any questions, please stop me and I'd be happy to answer any that you may have. So I am on page 1, just a public improvement district. Again, this is the summary of what they are. It's just a simply defined area within the city that has the ability to levy an assessment. And that's one of the critical items there. So it levies an assessment, not a tax. And that assessment can be levied for maintenance, which would be something, for example, like putting in landscaping or maintaining landscaping in a defined area within the city, or it can be used for capital. And that would typically be if a new subdivision, for example, was going in and a PID was put on top of that, and it could fund water, sewer, things of that nature. My understanding is one of the main things that the city would potentially be looking at a PID for is for maintenance. So as I go through this, again, it does speak to both maintenance and capital, but I'll try and kind of hit on the maintenance a little bit more and not maybe go into as much detail on the capital. So one of the nice things is those assessments are very flexible. They can be levied on any types of property, as you can see there, the residential, commercial, or retail. What we typically try and do is with that assessment payment is we try to get that on the property tax bill. Property owners that have an assessment to be paid are much more likely to pay that if it's on the property tax bill. Having said that, the appraisal districts and or the tax assessor collector districts typically are the ones that kind of control that. So the assessment creates a lien on the property, and that lien stays with the property. So does not go with the owner, but stays with the property. Ideally, on a residential homestead, we typically like to have that the PID in place before the homestead is established. If we do that, then we have a lien that is foreclosable. But if not, we still have seen success with that even after the fact. So as you can see there, those assessments can be foreclosed on in a similar manner as property taxes, again, depending on when that PID was created. One of the things that's very important is the assessments, at least in a capital PID, are fixed and structured to be level throughout the life of the bond. So we don't want those increasing on a homeowner over time. And then again, as you can see there, for capital or a capital PID, those assessments can be prepaid. And so you will see at times where a homeowner will move into a PID, they'll have an assessment and they can, again, pay that off in full if they want to at any time. And then that last bullet point, which is very important, is the assessment is subordinate to any governmental ad valorem taxes. So obviously city taxes, county, school district taxes, but it is superior to all private financing, including the mortgage. So the main goal of the PID on page 2 is to limit the repayment for the special benefits to the area within the PID. Said another way, what we're trying to do is localize the payment within the PID for the entities or for the people that are benefiting from that PID. So if again, you have a situation where you have landscaping within a PID, your taxes wouldn't be used, someone who lives outside of that PID wouldn't be paying for it. It would be the people or the property owners living inside the PID that would be paying that assessment. Whenever a PID is set up, a service and assessment plan is required. And as you can see there, that has kind of all the details as it relates to the PID. So you can see the project plan, if it's capital, the funding process, the timing. It talks about how assessments are allocated and levied, so all of those things. One of the things that's very important to know is the Service and Assessment Plan, or the SAP, is approved by City Council. And so your initial SAP is approved, and then you have annual SAP updates. So every year this would come back to the council for the approval of the levy of the assessments. One of the things, that last main bullet point there, and again, this really has to do with capital, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but debt can be issued in the event of a capital PID. And so that debt would be repaid from the assessments levied within the public improvement district. And one of the nice things about that is we have seen to this point where the city can issue PID revenue bonds, and that debt does not count against the city's general credit ratings. So that is a good thing. So let me just kind of give a little bit more detail on page 3. As you can see there, Chapter 372 is the area of the local government code that authorizes the creation of public improvement districts. And typically what you see is, again, a PID is a defined area. Most of the time it is, a PID is set up within the city limits, although it can be set up inside an ETJ of the city as well. One of the things, as I said before, is an assessment is the only type of revenue that can be raised within a public improvement district. So a PID does not have powers to tax, again, just to levy and collect that assessment. And one of the nice things about public improvement districts and why we've seen a rise in the use of those over the last, coming up on probably 8, 9, 10 years, is they're very versatile. They're very flexible. And if you go to the following page, this kind of gives a snapshot of all the different projects that a PID can fund. And again, a lot of these are capital, but some of these are maintenance, such as the first one there, as you can see, landscaping or the maintenance of landscaping. Also, lighting is another big one within a public improvement district. And then what I see most commonly are construction of streets or improving of streets. And then also, as you kind of skip down towards the bottom, water, wastewater, drainage improvements is very big within a public improvement district, as well as improvement of parks. So on this page, those are the main items that I typically see that are funded with a public improvement district. On the following page, as you can see there, supplemental services are there or can be funded through a public improvement district. And then that next one there, the payment of expenses incurred in the establishment, administration, and operation of the district. One of the things that's very key is what we try and do anytime we set up a public improvement district is make it where it is not a cost to the city. And what I mean by that is the assessments that are levied on the property owners can be used to pay for the PID. So this is something where it's typically not a huge time sink, if you will, on your staff. And again, it's not hitting your general fund budget or anything of that nature. So on the following page, how is a PID established? One of the things that I would say, and you can see at the very top there, these are very specific entities. And as such, legal advice on the front end, financial advice on the front end is highly encouraged. I have seen PIDs before where a city set them up without maybe getting some of the institutional knowledge to help do that. And so we've actually had to go back in and reset them up, if you will. So again, always encourage, whether it's bond counsel, whether it's the city's general counsel, to be involved on the front end. But as you can see there, a petition requesting the establishment of the PID is filed with the city. There's different ways that that can occur. And as you can see there, generally you have a 50% threshold, whether that's from taxable value of the property, whether that's the number of owners in the property, or whether that is the percent of the area of the property. But that is how that petition comes about. On the next slide, as you can see how a PID is established, the different things that that petition must state. So it talks about the proposed improvement or improvements. It talks about the estimated cost of those improvements, the boundaries of the PID, the method of assessment, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and then if there's any apportionment of costs between the PID and the city as well, it will lay that out too. So on the following page, I talked about the service and assessment plan being put together. And so that service and assessment plan, again, details the improvements. It also has, again, the estimated cost. It has the method of assessment. So assessments can be levied based on different metrics. It can be levied on a front foot measurement, if you will, on square footage, which is not uncommon with commercial or retail entities. It can even be levied based on taxable assessed value, although that's very rare. And as you can see there, it just includes that breakdown of costs between the PID and the city. You will see, or you can see, a feasibility report. This is not necessarily as common on a maintenance PID. That would be something more to do with kind of a large scale commercial capital PID. And then that last thing there, detailing the proposed improvements, these are really city discussion items. So should the improvements be made? Do they really fit with what the city is trying to do on a long-term basis? And then, as you can see, are there shared costs proposed or needed? In other words, would the PID pay for a portion and the city pay for another portion? On the following slide, an advisory body may be set up. It doesn't have to be, but it may be set up. And so as you can see there, typically if you do set up an advisory body, they're responsible for developing and recommending that improvement plan to the governing body. The governing body is City Council. So City Council sets up the PID and directs the PID. And again, this would simply be an advisory body. It is not a separate governmental body. On the next page, I talked just a little bit about the determination of the assessment. And so as you can see here, working with the PID administrator, and what the PID administrator is that is a third party that typically contracts with the city. Again, they are paid from assessments levied within the public improvement districts, but they are handling things. They are putting together the service and assessment plan. In many cases, they will be the interface with assessment payers, so your property owners. There are very specific rules now as to how a PID has to be made known to the property owner. You will have people, quite frankly, that a lot of times are signing documents to buy their home or whatnot that don't realize that they're in a PID, or maybe don't really fully understand what that means. And so your PID administrator in many cases will be fielding the phone calls, basically saying, you're in a public improvement district, you pay an assessment, et cetera, et cetera. So the nice thing is, again, that takes that burden off of your city staff. I talked a little bit about how that assessment can be levied, whether it's front foot, square foot, or the value of the property. And then the main thing that we're trying to do is, at the end of the day, is, again, we're localizing the repayment of whether it's maintenance, whether it's capital, to the property owners that are benefiting from it. If you look at it from a residential standpoint, just as a quick example, a lot of times if you have a residential or a home that has a 40-foot lot, and then you have a residence that has a 70-foot lot, that 70-foot lot owner will pay more or pay a higher assessment than the 40-foot lot owner. So that's typically how those PIDs are set up. On the following page, as you can see there, the administrative responsibilities with the PID. Again, I would just say that if you decide to move forward with one, make sure that whether it's myself, financial advisor, whether it's bond counsel, whether it's city council, are involved from day one. In particular, if you have a capital PID, I always advise my clients, make sure that you have a development agreement in place before any public improvement district is set up. It's not uncommon to get a developer that comes to the city and says, you know what, I need a PID set up as quickly as possible because that helps me with my financing, and we'll work out the details after the fact. And as soon as you approve that, then you lose some of your leverage. So again, particularly on the capital PID, always have a development agreement in place. As you can see there, the consultants will help with the creation, will help with the levy of the assessments. And then in the event of a capital PID, if you're issuing debt, there are certain things that have to be met, whether it's SEC reporting, whether it's tax exemption, as the city issues GO bonds, for example, that are tax exempt. A PID can issue assessment revenue bonds, which can be tax exempt as well. That second main bullet point is very key, which is, in the event of non-payment, city council would institute foreclosure proceedings. And there are metrics or benchmarks, I should say, that have to be met. So it's not just simply where someone doesn't pay the day after they don't pay, you institute foreclosure. But in a worst case, in a period of non-payment or significant period of non-payment, then the city council would be on the hook to commence foreclosure proceedings. And then that last bullet point there, as you can see, again, those annual administrative costs, and there are costs to that, whether that's costs relating to the audit and the numbers being put in the audit, whether it's just the day-to-day of the PID administrator, those again are all paid from the PID assessments. So again, no impact on the general fund. The last slide I would just quickly go through is, you obviously, as you all know, you have a TERS or have TERS in Duncanville, which are tax increment reinvestment zones, also known as TIFs. And so this slide really just compares a TERS with a public improvement district and shows the difference there. Both of those are set up by City Council, again, the public improvement district, after receiving that petition. Neither are separate governmental entities. And put simply, what that means is City Council retains control, whether it's a TERS or a public improvement district. As you can see there on the TERS revenue stream, TERS can collect property taxes and/or sales taxes. That public improvement district, once again, does not have any taxing power. It simply collects assessments. And again, those are approved and levied by City Council. That next block there, as you can see, the additional cost to an owner. If I live in a TERS and I'm a homeowner, I don't pay any extra taxes. It's just the taxes I pay, a portion of them go to the TERS. If I live in a PID, I do pay an additional cost in the form, again, of an annual assessment payment. As you can see there, I talked a little bit about the capital. So you can issue debt for both a TERS and a PID. And then the last thing there, as you can see, is the termination as far as how those are ended. So earlier on the specified date, or in the case of the TERS, the collection of the full TERS revenue amount. If it's a PID, then collection of all of the assessments that were levied at the front end of the public improvement district. So that was a quick kind of 30,000 foot view of public improvement districts. And with that, I'd certainly be happy to go back and go over anything in more detail or answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Jason. I do have a couple of quick questions. We just answered one, I guess, with this last matrix you showed. There is additional cost to the land, to the property owners. And,
Yes, sir.
and the PID is established, as this first one says, is that only after receiving a petition from the landowners. So what I'm trying to put together in my mind is that somebody in the city has to get together with other landowners and say, how about signing a petition to establish a PID for us? And those individuals then establish the boundary lines for the PID, or is it by individual property?
Well, there would be boundary lines that would be submitted to council. If it is a new development, then that's fairly easy, right? Because your developer will own that land and will basically come to you and say, we want to put 300 houses and here's the land that we own. If it was more of an existing, then yes, that would have to be something that would be done. Again, if you remember, those are set up based off of the 50% test that I kind of went over, whether that's tax value, number of owners, or area. And so in conjunction with working with the city council and with staff, we would have to determine what those boundaries would be. One thing that I would also say is those boundaries have to occur in area that will be benefited by the PID. So in other words, you couldn't simply include a stretch of businesses, for example, if there was no benefit being provided to them, because as we talked about, there's the fairness concept. We don't want them, and they can't pay for or pay an assessment and receive no benefit from that, if that makes sense.
It's hard for me to accept it as just to put it as a general property owner that, let's say people want to establish a PID and then my home is included in that. I have to pay property taxes and a PID assessment. How is that sold to a property owner to say this is to their individual benefit versus the benefit of overall PID?
So what you would typically see is if it's new construction, if it's a subdivision, is that there is a higher level of benefit and a higher level, I hate to say quality, but in theory, a higher level of quality that's being provided with those amenities that are provided by the PID. And so I know I work for a number of entities kind of in the northern Collin County area where that's very common up there to have public improvement districts. And if you drive through a lot of those neighborhoods that have the PIDs on it, you find that it has more amenities and it's a little bit nicer, and there's nicer landscaping and signage and things of that nature. And so that's really the trade-off. Now, to your point, Mayor, I think the question would be is if you had some kind of maintenance PID, is really talking with whether it's commercial and retail entities, whether it's residential homeowners, basically being able to show, okay, we're asking you to pay this assessment, or we'd like to levy this assessment. Here's what you're getting in return. But that is very much something that would be a dialogue, because to your point, Mayor, if I'm a homeowner or a commercial entity, I don't want to pay something for nothing.
So is it more typical to establish a PID on vacant land before property is actually built? That's kind of what I'm receiving here.
I would say that most of the time, yes. And certainly, again, with the capital PID, absolutely. With the maintenance, I have seen those where they have been established after the fact. And that's been, again, working with the commercial and retail entities a lot of times that would like to see that and view that as a benefit to their business.
Okay. My last question goes back to slide number 9, I believe it was, where it showed all the different types of improvements that can be done. And you said that the improvement has to be listed at the establishment of the PID. Can additional improvements be added to the PID once it's established, or is it locked in, or does a separate one have to be established? How would that work?
On the capital side, they are generally set up to be locked in on the front end. So because what happens is that lien is established at the outset. And so you can't really, there's not really a mechanism within public improvement districts to go in after 10 years, say, well, you know what, we'd like to do this, and so let's up that lien. That there are legal problems with that sequence of events. So most of the time you see that where those are done on the front end.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a couple of quick examples of where PIDs have been established, just so we can kind of get a visual on where these things are?
Sure. So a couple of examples, a newer, quote unquote, a newer city, I would say city of Salina is one. City of Oak Point, those again are in the Collin and Denton County area. If you want to see a more mature city, the city of Mesquite has set up several PIDs within the last 2 years. City of Grand Prairie also has a number of maintenance PIDs. So just some very quick ones that I could rattle off, those would be the ones. And again, I think Grand Prairie, those are generally more maintenance focused.
They're also the city of Cedar Hill and DeSoto. They have PIDs as well.
Where would one be in Cedar Hill, Jessica? Do you know?
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooks.
I do. I had one when I lived off of Joe Wilson and Pleasant Run. It started out being a very new community without a HOA or HOA or even a volunteer HOA. And so now they have a PID set up there, again, on Joe Wilson and Pleasant Run. It's called the Willow Hollow community. Just over from that is where I got introduced to it. It's the Waterford Oaks edition in Cedar Hill. Also has one that was established before the Willow Run, and they were set up by the developer. And again, this was already pre-existing residents that was before I got there as well. But my home was new when I first initially did it, but there was no PID associated with it. And then they have several throughout Cedar Hill. One would be Highland. I don't want to get that community mixed up, but it is based upon the community itself. Like we have, let's just say Hollywood Park, or we have Willow Run. It was set up in those areas as well. It was based upon the title of that community. And just FYI, I also paid it was like 10 cents per thousand that I paid when I was there. And what that equated for me in that community was, that was $179 a month. That was associated with my tax bill as well. So, and that's just Cedar Hill. DeSoto has one actually right next to me now. There are 300 homes being built. It's a new community right now on Danieldale. So there's 300 homes being built here in DeSoto, and with that happening, there's a PID already been established before they even moved in over there.
Is that where the,
I'd like to ask a question.
go ahead, Councilmember
Hello?
James.
Yes. Normally, when you already have an established area, it's not to be developed. Under normal circumstances, don't the people from that area get a petition and come to the council? It's not that the council tells them that they
No,
need to have a pit.
no, not at
No,
all.
I'm asking Tim. I'm
Okay.
asking Tim.
James, yes,
Mr. Hughes, could you understand, she was breaking up on her audio, but she's asking you a question, Mr. Hughes.
About who comes with a petition? And I apologize, yeah, I didn't get all that.
Yeah, your audio was breaking up,
And we just
Councilmember James.
tell them.
Jason, I
So-
believe that her question was typically with existing developed property, who usually moves a request forward? Does that come from residents that live there, or does that come from council? Who initiates a PID for existing property? Is that correct, Ms. Jameson?
Yes.
Okay. I think a lot of times, I mean, certainly what you would see is, again, it would have to be the property owners. And I think that that would be in conjunction in talks with the city. And I obviously don't know exact specifics in the city of Duncanville's case, but that is generally what you would see.
okay, so I had, if you're finished, Barry, I had my hand raised. I want to finish up with some experience that I've had with it as well.
Mr. McBurnett has a question. Why don't we take his question and then finish up with you, Mr.
No,
Clerk?
I didn't get finished, but I can ask mine later. Did you say me?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Councilmember Jameson, did you have it? Go ahead and follow up. I guess you're breaking up. Maybe it's a little better now. Go ahead.
Going back, I don't know which slide it was, but it was talking about the different things that you can do. And one of them was water. And my understanding was it had water and it had, can you go back to that slide? I don't know which one it
I think
was.
it was 9. It might be slide 9. No, keep going. There it is. 6.
When it's improvement of water, wastewater, or drainage facilities or improvements, acquisition, construction, or improvement. When the water system is a city. So like in a resident is a gated community where they take care of their own street and lights. Does that mean that you can get a PID for correct a water problem?
And Councilmember Jameson, I'm sorry, you broke up some. Let me answer what I think you were asking. The main item as it relates to the public improvement project is it has to be owned by the city. So you can't construct improvements that are privately owned. So, and again, if what I heard of what you said is, for instance, if you're putting in water lines, obviously as you put in water lines to a residential community, the city owns those water lines. Now they can be put in by the developer, but they're conveyed, the ownership's conveyed to the city. So as long as the city owns those improvements, generally speaking, and they fit within Chapter 372, then those are legal expenditures of PID funds.
Okay, any other question, Councilmember Jameson?
Ridiculous.
Mr. McBurnett, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. I just had a relatively simple question. Is that, we're talking to, ultimately council will approve it, but do these typically go to P&Z first? That's my question.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would say yes, most do, particularly those on the capital side, because generally as a city is trying to come to a development agreement with the developer, a lot of times the P&Z discussions come into play as far as the standards and what's expected to be built. So that, at least on the capital side, is what I am most accustomed to seeing.
Okay, Mr. Summerlin, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick question here. There was, Jason, you talked about having consultants that set up some of the legal constructs of a PID, but who ultimately has to do the accounting and the reporting for the PID? Would that not fall on the city to do?
Richard, it does, in the sense that since it is an entity controlled by the city, it shows up in your audit. That's what's most common. A lot of times my experience is that the PID administrator will handle a lot of that and basically turn around to you on September 30th as an example and kind of hand you the information you need. Having said that, but yes, you would still be working with your auditors to make sure that it was in a form that they could use to put in your audit, and they would certainly have questions about that. But that's generally how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're about done with this. Councilmember Cooks, you wanted to conclude a comment, please?
Yeah, additional comments here. In reference to the question that was asked, who would initiate this? It comes directly from what my experience in it, and that's been with 2 neighborhoods, from the neighbor. It had nothing to do with the council at all. And then those neighbors would walk around and get, I think I saw 50%, or is it 51%, Jeff? 50% of the neighborhood to either agree that that's something they want to do a petition. It takes a while from what I've experienced. It takes a while to get it approved because, as you know, walking a neighborhood getting 51%, it's a challenge, whether they're a rental property or they're owners of the property. But I think it was more so the reason I wanted the education piece of it is I had the experience in the maintenance area, not necessarily in the capital improvement, but in the maintenance area. And the reason I had it in the maintenance area is there were at the time in that neighborhood, there was not a name on that particular community. And in order to get a name of that community and a wall taken up, that's kind of where that PID was established in that particular neighborhood. And now that same neighborhood value has picked up because, as Jeff mentioned, it enhances the overall community in those particular neighborhoods with a little bit of nothing versus having an HOA who takes care of everything and is not pretty much monitored by the city. The other portion I wanted to ask Jeff is, Jeff, I know that the one I participated in, it was 10 cents per thousand. Would you share with the council how you set that up on how much a neighborhood would adopt or the council would adopt if they adopt like this?
So it is all dependent, Councilmember Cooks, on the project and how much that costs. And whenever you talk about 10 cents, to Councilmember Cooks' point, what we typically do, as I said before, this is not a tax, but we can turn that assessment into a tax rate equivalent, because typically one of the things that we try and show is the total overlapping tax plus assessment that a homeowner would be paying in the example of a residential neighborhood. So to your point, Councilmember Cooks, if it's 10 cents and that would be added to city taxes, county taxes, school taxes, et cetera, to again get an idea there. But I have seen I have seen assessments range anywhere from a 5 cents or from 5 cents, which was a maintenance assessment, to closer to 80 or 90 cents, which was capital. And again, all based off of the goal of the PID. And again, whether it's a maintenance PID or a capital PID.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I think the other point for this for me, I'm thinking about the Neighborhood Vitality Committee, who at one point was talking about a grant. Remember we talked about matching grants, where we would say if a neighborhood came up with a certain amount, then the city would match it for the other amount for a matching grant, whether it was for landscape or whether it was for a marquee with their names on it. Well, this takes that away. It puts the ownership back onto the neighborhood. And it's not, again, something that, again, that a council would push, but it's something the neighborhood would push. And so I wanted to just bring it up in case there was others who wanted to have their own neighborhood to have an option to look at versus not having an option to look at, something else they could look at. Let me look at my notes, make sure that's all I wanted to cover. I do have one other question for Jeff. Jeff, I'm not familiar though with the business piece of it. Can you share a little bit more how a business PID would work? I mean, is that, did you just, let's say we had Main Street, just use Main Street for an example. Would that be a district perhaps? You just use Main Street and it would be set up to do what?
I think you could certainly do that. And I think really that in my mind is something that the businesses would be looking at and saying, okay, if we have better landscaping, better signage, better lighting, things of that nature, would that help drive our traffic? You know, would that help our business? So I think that that's typically what you see. And that's what, again, it kind of goes back to those entities approaching the city council and saying, okay, we like these items. We understand maybe that you can't come out of your budget for it. But we're willing to pay this assessment if you would put these in and own them.
Okay.
Okay, we need to move on. Yeah, Councilman.
I want to ask a question.
Yes, Councilmember Jameson, I know you had another question to ask. Go ahead, please.
If you were in a neighborhood and the preponderance of people, the 51%, decided that they wanted to establish a PID and you did not want to do that and you lived in that neighborhood, what are your options? If it's already established, you're not moving into it, you're there.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I would suggest is, you don't want me playing lawyer. I think bond counsel and your city council would probably be, the authorities on that. I will say that my understanding is well, not my understanding. The assessment lien is with the property. And let's say that I'm in this residential neighborhood, the PID is put in place after the fact. I don't pay my assessments. I go to sell my house. That lien is obviously still on my property. So in some shape, form, or fashion, that lien would have to be cleared. As it relates to the day-to-day and what would happen there, again, that's probably something that I would defer to bond counsel or city council to discuss.
Okay.
And I'll just add that they do have the right to object. When a petition is presented to city council, there then has to be notice and a hearing. There's a public hearing, and at that public hearing, objections can be heard. And that's one way that city council can determine whether or not they want to go forward with allowing the PID.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Jason Hughes. We appreciate your time and education on this matter, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to, we are really close and quick on time, but we're going to take whatever time we have to. Moving on to item number 2B, it's discuss the potential options for utilizing Duncanville CARES Act funding for Economic Director James. Jessica, you're up.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. I also want to note that Tia Pettis, which is the Assistant Director of Finance, as well as Tanya Hunter, our Regional Emergency Management Operations Coordinator, are both available this evening to answer any questions that Council might have. We're going to be providing you a briefing, as the Mayor stated, to recap what we previously talked to you about in June in terms of the CARES Act funding that was allocated to Duncanville. There is an agenda item this evening, an individual agenda item this evening for consideration for council. And so this briefing will allow the opportunity for us to further examine the changes that have come about since your last council meeting, and then also the opportunity for you all to discuss it to be able to make a decision during the regular agenda item. So we will be providing you just a brief update in terms of recapping what we've already discussed, and then also highlighting the additional changes and opportunities that Duncanville, the city of Duncanville has with partnerships. Next slide, please. So here's a brief recap of the eligible expenses as we discussed on June 23rd with the City Council. Those are all the expenses under the CARES Act that can be used with the funding that Duncanville's been provided. Those have been expanded, and we'll further discuss that later, but these, nothing has changed. This is the same slide that, like I said, that you saw on the 23rd. So you can see there, nothing's changed in terms of the healthcare. Basically, you can have residential assistance, business assistance, and also you can mitigate, cities can use the funds to mitigate their expenses associated with responding to the pandemic as well. Next slide, please. Here's a recap of the fund details that we talked about on the 23rd. The important takeaways from this are that the payments can from the fund may only be used to cover those costs, as we discussed, that are eligible by the CARES Act. One really important item is that all funds must be used by December 30th, and this is something that we talked a lot about at the last council meeting. And any unused portion, the city will be responsible for paying that back. The city is accountable for all funds dispersed and will be audited in the future. Any funds unaccounted for will have to be paid back. And then, as we talked about, the city does have some options. As we talked about, that the city can set up a program that complements the county. We had talked about using the Duncanville Outreach Ministries as possibly a partner with this. However, after further discussion with them, we determined that the city would still have to hire a third party to assist them, as they do not have the staff or the equipment to administer the program. Next slide, please. Here's a recap of the funding breakdown. As council knows, we received $2.173 million. Of that, approximately 20%, and I want to make note to council, we received on July, not June, July 2nd. The remaining 80% Duncanville will have access to once we provide the county with a usage plan and they approve it. And that's why this evening is so critical and so important, especially at the agenda item that will be coming forth during the regular session. Next slide, please. Since the City Council met in June, staff has attended numerous meetings with the county and has received additional information. This has been a very fluid situation with constant updates, and so it's really important to go over what's changed. The city has learned that straight time and emergency leave associated with the pandemic are now considered eligible employee payroll costs that can be covered. So we discussed that earlier. Initially it was not, but now what that means is that the city can recover $703,050, which is an increase compared to what we previously anticipated. In addition, Dallas County has provided Duncanville the opportunity to partner with them on their Dallas County Emergency Business Assistance Program. This means that the county will administer the funds Duncanville provides them for business assistance. And there's a little flow chart there that kind of highlights how this would potentially work. As council knows, in your update that you received, that the county's EBAP program is currently open in the application period, and it runs through the 26th. From that, eligible applicants receive Dallas County funding until exhausted. And we'll go into this further detail in terms of how this will all work. From that, then if there were businesses that did not receive funding from the county program, if the city did allocate a portion of funds to assist Duncanville businesses, then this is where the Duncanville businesses would have that opportunity to receive funding as well. So there's an option here for Duncanville businesses to get money through the county. And then again, if Duncanville was to allocate a portion of their CARES Act funding to the county for just Duncanville businesses, then if they did not receive a county grant, they could receive funding through Duncanville's funds. In addition, Duncanville can also partner with Dallas County on the residential assistance program. Dallas County has indicated that they have enough funds available to assist residents of the county through December. And we'll go into this in the next slides in detail in terms of comparing the different programs, the ones that the staff previously proposed compared to Dallas County's. So with that, if you would, next slide, please. So I've highlighted here on the page the differences between the previously proposed program and then the updated program. As I discussed earlier, the big change here is that the employee payroll costs, straight time and emergency leave are now, the city can now recoup those. So that's an additional $268,440 that the city can be reimbursed to help mitigate those costs incurred with the pandemic. Next slide, please. The main difference between the previous program and Dallas County's program when it comes to businesses, when it comes to the residential, is that the previous program included possible car payments. But water payments were not eligible expenses. They could apply for utility assistance, but unfortunately, the way that it was set up, Duncanville did not have the ability to provide them assistance with water. If the city partners with Dallas County, utilities can be covered, including water. So because it's going through Dallas County, this would be an opportunity for the city to actually recoup some of those costs for water bills that are outstanding. In addition, with Dallas County's program, residential program, residents can receive $1,500 a month up to 3 months worth of assistance. Now, the household income, one of the program requirements is their household income has to be less than 80% of the average median income in the Dallas area. The Dallas area median income is $82,123. Duncanville's median income is just over $53,220. So you'll see that there is an opportunity that Duncanville residents definitely can qualify for assistance. The other program requirements or details are similar. They have to prove that they've been impacted negatively from COVID, loss of employment, increased childcare costs, that type of thing. Both programs, no duplication of assistance, and then both programs would be administered by a third party. Dallas County's program for residential has $5 million available. That's how much was set up for the residents when the program was established. However, the county has indicated, even up to today, the county has indicated that they have enough money to assist county residents through December. Next slide, please. When comparing the business assistance programs, Dallas County is actually more expansive. It indicates, if you look there in the bold, that businesses can get assistance with equipment, payments of existing business-related loans. That can be mortgage, that can be equipment leases. Those are two things that were not included in the proposed program. In addition, the details of the program are slightly different, and this is where it's actually more expansive because businesses can receive up to $50,000. It's a maximum up to 3 months of assistance. They can also receive an additional $3,000 of restart capital, which is a lot more extensive than the proposed program. It is a forgivable 1-year loan. If the business continues to operate for 4 months with 60% of its employees working, they do not have to pay this back. In addition, this is aimed at businesses with no more than 100 employees. It is based on a lottery system, which is different than what we had proposed. And you can see there the different percentages that they've kind of highlighted that they would like to apply for the lottery system. But again, as we discussed before, the businesses that do not receive funding through Dallas County funds with their lottery system will be eligible for consideration through the funds that Duncanville provides. As council knows, the application period is currently open and closes on July 26th, as we talked about. And as you all know, we have been promoting Dallas County's program to businesses already throughout the community in order for them to be able to, for sure, apply for this program if they so choose. There have been some questions in terms of what happens if a business received a federal grant from the Personal Paycheck Protection Program. Can they still apply for one of these grants? And the answer is yes. How that would work is whatever that amount is that they received for the PPP, if they were to be awarded a county grant, if you will, they would just deduct the county amount of the grant from what they received for the PPP. So they would still have an opportunity, again, to receive potentially up to that $50,000 max. And just because they had received assistance previously, it does not disclude them from being able to apply and possibly receive further assistance. In addition, the business has to have revenue under 10 million, and they must have experienced a loss of at least 25% of income since March 1st due to the pandemic. So as you can see, it's a much more expansive program, but it still offers them the opportunity to apply and possibly receive money with those two options through the lottery system, or if Duncanville chooses to provide funds and partner with Dallas County. Dallas County does have $35 million available for this program to aid businesses. Next slide, please. So as we just talked about, you can see that Dallas County's program is very similar, and again, in some areas more extensive or expansive for opportunities for the small businesses to what staff previously proposed. One of the most critical things in discussing this partnership and why it's important is because it is the most efficient use of funds. There's no cost to the city to partner with the county. The county will be utilizing their own funds, not Duncanville's funds, especially for the residential program. And then for the business program, unless funds are supplied to them. And again, they'll use their Dallas County funds first and then Duncanville's second. If the city does partner with them on the business assistance program, the city will only pay us 7% of administrative fees. And this is for that additional amount of funds, just City of Duncanville funds. It ensures legal compliance, and this is very critical. It ensures legal compliance with the federal government, eliminating future clawbacks for this portion of the money. That's one thing that has been stated to us repeatedly by the county is the concern for clawbacks, that the federal government will be auditing these grants and how these funds are used. And if they're determined that they're used outside of the parameters of the program, the city will be liable for that. It minimizes required documentation, reporting, and audit exposure, which is something we just discussed. It's critical. It reduces the wait time for businesses and residents to receive needed assistance. Since the county already has both of these programs and a third party on board, and the programs are, the residential program will be up shortly again, but the program's already established and are already being administered. And finally, it reduces the amount of staff time associated with administering the programs. Quite frankly, the city does not have the amount of staff needed to properly administer the programs, nor does our local nonprofits. As you all know, staff's been administering the DCEDC grants that were provided, 118 of them. And that has taken a lot of resources to be able to do that. And so we just do not have the bandwidth to administer another large program internally, such as this. Next slide, please. So this is what staff's recommend proposal is for how the funds could be allocated that Duncanville received. Again, residential assistance will be provided by Dallas County. So the city of Duncanville does not, unless the council chose to do their own program, does not have to apply any funds for the residential component. That's already established, and Dallas County has enough funds to support that program. So staff would recommend $703,050 to help mitigate the city expenses. And again, we talked about what that change or that increase is. And then to allocate the remaining approximately 68% to the business assistance program, which is basically $1.47 million. And that would be to partner with Dallas County for those funds. Next slide, please. So the next steps that council has is to decide how you want to utilize the CARES Act funds that Duncanville received. Do you want to approve the $700,000+ to help mitigate the expenses associated with the pandemic that the city of Duncanville has incurred? Are you interested in partnering with Dallas County for the business assistance program for the remaining $1.47 million? And again, that agenda item will be coming later this evening. And then also, is council interested in partnering with the county on a residential assistance program? If they are interested in terms of obviously, as I talked about earlier, we are currently promoting the business program, and we'll continue to do that regardless. But if council's interested in partnering with the county for the residential component, as soon as the application period is open, staff would start promoting that program as well throughout the community. So with that, I'll be happy to, Tia and Tanya as well, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Jessica. I do have one comment question. If you go back to chart 25, please. If I understand, well, in using my recollection to the best possible, looking at that 1.47 million for business assistance, I think at the outset, we as a city were looking at taking that, used to be changed, if we change the percentages in that pie chart from 20 to 80, now I realize now it's been changed to 3268 because our expenses have gone up from 400,000 to 700,000 in terms of reimbursement. But it used to be 80-20, if I recall correctly. And in that 80% in the blue slot, we took that remainder and split it 40 and 40, 40% for business and 40% for residential. So it appears to me, and this is what I'd like your clarification or affirmation on, if I'm understanding, since the Dallas County could be taking over the residential assistance, and I think it was like $829,000 that we had split evenly for 40% and 40%. So now we take that $829,000, bulk it up, and put it all toward business assistance, which is to the benefit of our businesses. And Dallas County takes the burden of all residential, and it's to our benefit now to see that 1.47 million go into businesses versus used to be 829,000, I think. So yes. Is my thinking correct? Is my question after going through all that?
Yes, sir, you are exactly on target with that. That's exactly right. Because, initially we did not realize that Dallas County had those funds available to help with the residential need within our community. But since then, they've said, yes, we have funds available, and we have enough funds available to help county residents until December. And so that's why we're able to make this recommendation for you all to consider in terms of putting all the additional 68% to put that total amount towards business assistance, because residents can apply through Dallas County to receive assistance through them.
Jessica, remind me though, on the residential, is that a lottery as well?
So the residential component, and Tia, I'm going to ask you to jump in, but I do not believe that is.
That's correct, Jessica. My understanding that it's not a lottery. Again, that the county's indicated they have quite a bit of funding available, enough funding to reach through the end of the year. So as long as residents are eligible, my understanding is that they will be assisted.
So
yeah, my only concern is I know they have quite a bit. I don't know what a quite a bit would mean, other than I just want to make sure that the Duncanville residents receive some of that quite a bit, and it's not just spread out to the Dallas area only.
And again, Mr. Cooks, with the residential program, they do have to prove that they've been negatively impacted and what those expenses are. So they have to be able to prove up those expenses, and that's where that comes into play in terms of assistance. So.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about the approval piece at all. They have to approve it. I'm just
Yes.
saying, if they did approve it, I just want to make sure that Duncanville residents receive it over, let's say, if it's 80%, but Dallas residents receive 75% of the reimbursement, and Duncanville only receive 5%. I just want to make sure Duncanville gets its share portion for the residential.
Yes.
Let me jump in there, Jessica. See, I think too that Dallas County has put more money into the residential program. So I think that they're trying to make sure that they're providing enough funding to help all the residents that would need that funding in Dallas County.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
That was my question, was how did they make such a huge, not mistake, but the first presentation, we were told this was the amount of money that we would receive, period. And now all of a sudden, oh, no, we have more money for residential. That's pretty big.
Well, Councilmember Jameson, what happened is the amount of money that we received is still $2.1 million. What has changed that we've learned from the meeting that we had with you originally in June to now is that we again, as Jessica mentioned before, this has been a fluid situation with the county, and this is not to say anything with the county. I think they've been trying extremely hard too. They've been working with the federal government to make or to understand exactly how they can use the funding and use it appropriately themselves, because they also will be on the hook for any kind of auditing and so forth. And what has come up is they're able to receive more CARES Act funding themselves that they've been able to throw into their program. And so what we're really doing is leveraging the monies that they have and allowing us to have more monies that would be applied to the business part of the funding. So it's not as if that I think there was an issue on the county or us as far as the allocation. That 2.1 is still there. What has happened is we've gotten a better understanding of what the conditions are on how those monies can be spent.
But at the 1.4,
they found more money to allocate.
Yes, ma'am. I believe they're probably allocated. I mean, good question. They're allocated more money, that they were able to receive more CARES Act funding that they could then again make a robust, I believe, residential program. So that's allowing us, as been pointed out earlier, to apply more money into the business assistance program.
Correct. They
So
received
basically,
a
though,
second.
as far as the residential part, if we give it to Dallas County to do that, then we don't really have anything to do with it.
Well, no, ma'am, we're not giving them anything. We're still holding on to that 2.17. What we're saying is because we believe they've got enough money in their program, we can then allocate more of our money to the business assistance. So none of our money is going to their residential program. They're operating that themselves.
That's what I was saying. So we won't have anything to do with it, though.
We will not have
residential portion.
Yeah, they'll be running that program, but as alluded to before, there's enhancements to their program as opposed to what we're providing, and especially one comment that Jessica made was the ability for them to be able to use the county money assistance that would again pay for water utility bills that if we ran the program would not be able to be utilized for that.
Right. Well,
You're right, but you're right.
yeah, that's what I want to make sure of is that then we would just be really responsible for the city expenses and the business assistance.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
they will take over residential and we'd be sort of out of that.
Exactly, but there would be we would not lose any of that 2.1.
Right.
That would just be, yes, ma'am, that would be pushed to the county program.
I guess what I meant was we would lose the jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah, we wouldn't be running the program. That's correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
So the 1.4, if it's not used by all our business owners, remind me where the money goes. Does it go back to federal government?
So, Mr. Cooks, if we do not utilize all those funds, they will be available for the city of Duncanville to utilize. A question or maybe a concern there is just timing. By the time that it goes through the process and businesses are awarded, that does not leave a lot of time, since we're on such a short time frame. It does not leave a lot of time for us the city to do a lot with those other funds, but they would be available to us if they were not utilized by Duncanville businesses. Yes, sir.
It will still be available to us if they don't use the 1.4.
That is correct. Yes, sir. I mean, we'd still have until the end of the year to utilize those. That's correct.
And if we do not utilize it by the end of the year, it's returned.
That's correct.
The only reason I would want to support this a little bit would be only because of the water utility piece. I think I'm understanding on the utility side that if we took it on ourselves, then we could not use it for utilities over the water piece. But if we use it for the county, we could. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. That's the only reason I would support it. Because other than that, I'm just afraid that our Duncanville residents won't receive what they need to receive from the county when they talk about residential support. But I'd rather take my chances of at least trying, since it's including the water and utility at this point.
Well, Councilmember Cooks, I will add in our discussions with the county and Charles Reed in specific, who is really the individual on top of all this, they did a very, very deep statistical analysis of determining how many residents within the entire Dallas County are going to be requiring some residential assistance. And that's how they came up with the number that said they feel strongly that they will be able to accommodate those qualified individuals. And here again, I'll emphasize those qualified individuals who need assistance, that they'll be able to help them through December. And I think we have to put some degree of trust in their statistical analysis and in their ability to carry it out. And then here again, I'm concerned about our residents getting their fair share and being accorded properly. And I believe strongly that they're going to be able to do that because of the manner in which Charles Reed has administered this and done the background, all the legwork on all this for us. And, I'll go back and reiterate one thing that I covered is that we, in our former program before, when we look at this, that we have doubled the amount of money that we can take care of our local businesses. It used to be $829,000. Now we can take care of our local business to the tune of $1.47 million. And that's because of turning over the program for residential to the county. So there's really a lot of benefit. Number one, yes, we believe strongly that our citizens will be taken care of for the residential piece. And number two, fantastic opportunities for our local businesses to be able to take care of 1.47 million and being run through that. So this is something, as you noticed, and looking through the agenda, this is an agenda item. This is the information that we can gather and get some questions now, but we have an agenda item that's going to, if you looked at the agenda item, I don't want to jump too far ahead because city attorney is going to slap me. but there are some blanks to be filled in on that agenda item, and it all relates to what we just went over. So that's where we're coming from. So,
But I'll have it later as well then.
okay, any other questions or comments now? Okay, we'll close out on item 2B, and time is now, 7:20. And we're still on our briefing session, and we're going into item 2C, which is the city calendar. Mr. Frederickson.
Mayor, members of council, we just wanted to go over briefly the city calendar. Obviously in light of the increased numbers of COVID cases statewide and even countywide, and the governor's extending the order or allowing for the use of online virtual meetings. So I think the question is, we just want to go and have a quick review of the calendar beginning in August. So starting off like on the 3rd, for example. Well, let me go back in July. I think a quick note is you have, starting next week, 2 Zoom interview meetings scheduled for the 27th and 28th to interview candidates for various boards and commission posts. It is my understanding, Mayor, that you will not be available for the 27th.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And I'm not aware of anybody else. I think everybody else will be able to be present, I think, at the 2. Just wanted to verify that that is still good for everyone. We've actually notified the candidates, so they're planning on attending, and they'll do that via Zoom. So you will not have to meet in person for those 2 dates. Going to August, we have scheduled, thank you for the slide. So we have scheduled a joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning and City Council on the 3rd to discuss the zoning code or zoning update. So the question is, do we still want to meet? That would be in person. We'd obviously enforce social distancing and try to spread everybody else as much as possible. But again, in light of what's happening, if that's something that we want to continue with, or do we want to push that? And I would probably ask that question to the other meetings, joint meetings that we have in August. And each of those, even including the one with the Parks Board, I think would need to be in person, just because the discussion, I think, would be better served in person, quite frankly. But again, with COVID, that is a call that the City Council needs to make. We still propose, and then the next question is, again, in light of COVID, we kind of discussed tentatively whether we try to come back to in live or in-person meetings, but again, it's up to council. But in light of what we're seeing, do we want to continue with the Zoom meeting for the 4th and 18th?
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett has his hand raised.
Okay.
Thank you. Paul, I might be stepping a little bit ahead, but I was looking at the 13th for the budget meeting. Okay. And based upon the county not getting the numbers in there, should that meeting be moved?
I sent, as council knows, in my weekly update, we sent some information regarding the county not having by the end of July a certified tax roll. What has come to light, and I'll let Richard answer that question, is we still feel, after I visited with Richard, that we think that the numbers that we are going to get, while they are considered quote unquote estimates, they're going to be good estimates that should carry forward. Richard, do you want to answer that particular question about having the meeting on the 13th?
Yes, thank you, Paul. I actually inquired from Dallas County, since things are a little bit wackadoodle in terms of the order that we're going to be receiving things this year due to the Dallas County appraisal district being not having the certified roll until the 20th. And the answer is that the tax code allows them to calculate our tax rates based on that certified estimate. And to make a long story short, what they'll do with that certified estimate is it will contain the total of all the properties that have been certified, and then what they'll do is they'll have an estimate of just the remainder that is it's still under protest, and so they will use an estimated value for those properties. And so that difference between that and certified roll, excuse me, will be so minuscule that the tax law allows them to go ahead and calculate the tax rate based on that estimate. And Dallas County has assured me that once they calculate those rates, they cannot change. And so no matter what happens with the remainder of the protest, when we get certified roll, the rates will not change. They will stay as calculated and given to me. Dallas County will give me those rates on the 7th of August, or rather they'll certify them. They'll give me the rates ahead of that, but they'll certify the rates on the 7th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Summerlin.
So the bottom line is, and Paul and Richard, both of you agree we should go ahead with the 13th. It's going to be substantive enough that we can go ahead and make decisions on it.
We think so.
That is my opinion, that we will be fine making opinions on it. I mean, we could push it back if there were other reasons or circumstances, but it's not necessary.
Okay. All right, if it's good with everybody, we'll go ahead and hold that on the 13th as for a budget meeting. Mr. McBurnett, are you okay? I know you had the question on that. You all right with that?
No, that was the answer I was looking for. So,
Okay.
so with it being minimal and the changes, we're good.
Okay.
So I think for us, the question, I think the first question is the meeting on the 3rd, the joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss the zoning update. Is council still amenable to having that in person and discussing that, or is that something they would feel better postponing?
I was actually going to address both of those joint meetings, Paul. Looking at the logistics, number one, we can't do it in council chambers. It won't work in terms of putting things together just so we can have it as a cohesive meeting and have good discussions with each other. And then looking at it, it's already identified going to the senior center. So imagine us social distancing in the large room in the senior center with like one person to a table. And then you take all of P&Z and you take the presenters, the consultants, and you take ourselves. We don't have the ability to televise that or live stream it in that senior center. And by law, it has to be. So to me, the logistics of it preclude our being able to have these joint meetings until we have the ability to put them together back in City Hall so that our public can attend in person as well. Because
Wait. City Attorney, do you have to televise P&Z meetings? We didn't used to televise P&Z meetings. In fact, we still don't televise some of these meetings.
It's a joint meeting with City Council and City. How do we obviate City Council not being televised then? Well, City Attorney, go ahead, answer the question.
I mean, it's a public meeting. It needs to be available to the public. Either they need to be able to attend it or listen to it. I believe that under the amended rules, they can listen into it, but it can't, if it's not available for the public to attend either virtually or physically, then it's a closed meeting. It's not a public meeting.
So all they have to do though is listen.
It needs, I believe so, under the amended rules.
But okay, Paul, do we even have the technology to have it broadcasted just for audio out of the senior center?
No, any time that we have recorded, town halls there, but they've been recorded and played after the fact, but no No, other than the ability to trying to Facebook Live or something to that effect. I mean, you could obviously have a phone system there and hear it audibly, and well, the thing is, you're also listening to conversations, and when you're all social distanced, especially at the senior center, you would have to almost mic every table if people had comments, and so. Obviously, this situation is making it very difficult because, again, we're not the only community that's dealing with this, and having the appropriate technology to be able to meet the conditions, as the city attorney said, with the governor's order. And that's what makes it really tough. And so for us, I think the issue is, if there were live meetings where the public could be at large or could attend, that would not be an issue, still having it there. But when you have that and you're just basically asking for larger groups to get together, that makes it problematic. So that's why it's a very tough decision. But I think, again, in light of the increased numbers, one perspective is we would be putting off this for another, month. And I'm not, thinking that's great. But at the same token, what do we do? And it's a tough situation. So that's why we're bringing that forward.
And my point is, I just don't think we have the technology to convey to our citizens what they deserve to have in terms of being able to hear or see it. And that's why I think it's to our citizens' benefit that we postpone this until they can attend as they would like to, because there's just too many constraints trying to do it as a joint meeting in the senior center with social distancing. And it's not possible with the technology to broadcast it just even for audio. So that's why I'm suggesting that council consider not that we postpone these joint meetings until we have the ability to do it the correct way.
And in the meantime, we'll be able to look to see if there's other technologies that we can implement, or if at the end of August, if things have changed, the numbers are better, then we can certainly consider doing something different and accommodating the public or what have you. But right now, it's
Is there a timeline we're up against if we don't have this joint meeting sooner than later?
I'm not aware of a timeline, Greg. Ramey, we don't have a timeline, and obviously COVID's already pushed this anyway. It's just obviously the sooner the better, no doubt. But obviously COVID making it different. But Mr. Ramey, do we have a timeline
Well,
for
the timeline is just one that we control. So.
Okay.
And in fact, that was going to be one of the agenda items on the first meeting that we have going back into it, is sitting back down with you guys to figure out what the new timeline would be.
And then obviously, mayor, members of council, would be the meetings on the 4th and the 18th to go back to Zoom and having Zoom for those meetings as well.
Yeah, I think for any future city council meetings, we can pretty well depend on them being virtual based on the way things are going, and have to wait and see what the governor does. But he keeps extending it, and the information that we're getting informally is he fully intends to keep extending the emergency declaration, which is going to apply to the waiver or apply to the ability for us to hold city council meetings virtually.
Yeah.
But that's, it's not confirmed, but that's the information we're receiving now.
Yes, sir. And then obviously the only other thing that's hanging out there would be the 13th, the budget meeting. And I know we did it in person, trying to adhere to social distancing. I think we're just going to need that one meeting to just kind of review budget and any additional changes. Is that something that, again, in person or in Zoom? What's the preference of the council? If we have it in the briefing room, we can certainly televise that. We've made it work before. So that's, again, I'll defer to council.
But I want to ask something. You kind of skipped August 10th, the joint meeting with Park
Well,
Board.
Yes, ma'am. I was really kind of lumping all those together because, again, yes, ma'am. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. So basically, on your August meeting, you have a meeting every Monday, and they're all joint meetings. And I think each and every one of those I think would behoove both groups to meet in person, and I think all those would be postponed for a month.
Okay.
Obviously, seeing what happens at the end of August. Thanks for, yeah.
Okay, so the budget meeting, well, gosh, for me, budget is so extensive and involved. The way we did it last time was okay, where we came in person. Since it's only one.
No, John Ed, I agree with that, that the budget in person is pretty important. So, you know, I'd stay with the budget meeting and doing it in briefing room with the social distancing that we're able to do. You know, staff members were in the council chambers. If we needed them, we called them in. But we were able to do social distancing and be able to cover with technology by carrying it on in the briefing room. So I agree with the budget meeting being in person.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett has his hand raised.
Okay. Yeah, Don.
And it's simply that I agree with the same thing too.
Okay.
And then just to make a quick comment, Mayor, I am trying to follow your ground rules.
Don, you know, I appreciate you doing that, but this works a whole lot better than punching the raise your hand.
So that I can clarify, the joint meetings that we have scheduled on the 3rd, 10th, 17th, and 24th, we will postpone those and push those out at least a month. Reschedule those. We will continue with Zoom meetings for the city council meeting on the 4th and the 18th. And then on the 13th, the budget meeting will meet in person, but we will have social distancing. And then again, as you mentioned, Mayor, that staff will meet in the council chamber, or will be in the council chamber, can be called upon if necessary. And again, I think we'll need that one night. I do not think going to September at this point will be necessary, because as we all know, things are changing. I think we could visit in August if something does change and bring the calendar to the council at that time. That's all I have for city council consideration.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Then that would cover what we need to take care of in terms of briefing items. So what we're looking at, council, is taking care of executive session now or taking care of executive session later. And I'm amenable to going either way.
Later.
Mayor, just my apologies, but I don't think we've quite finished the calendar.
Oh, well, I thought we had. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Paul, are you continuing with that in September? I thought you had it out to October.
No, I did, but I provided September, October, but my suggestion is, because it's so fluid, I think we can wait until, you know, the meeting in August, either the 4th or 18th. We'll come back with a new schedule and present to council. Again, as we're just monitoring the situation, we'll come back. I don't know if there's a point of going to September. I just provided September and October just to have that, but I think the are changing. I think we can wait.
All right. Thank you. The other thing that I did want to make a comment, Paul, and you might not be involved with this as much, but our consultant with SGR also had a couple of dates that she was talking about getting together, that she sent something out today on that. So I wanted to make sure those were on the calendar as well.
Okay, I will.
Yes, sir. I will be putting those on the calendar tomorrow and getting that prepared.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other?
One other quick note. I apologize. You're also seeing in your August meeting, the 22nd, is a fire truck pull that will probably be postponed or canceled due to the governor's order on no more than 10. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. Just want to make that clarification.
Yeah, and that very unfortunate, because those monies go to Special Olympics.
Yes.
So, you know, I interestingly, as it is fire truck pull, and the purpose of that is to raise money for Special Olympics. I did ask the chair of Special Olympics, is it still possible for us to donate individually to Special Olympics and have it count? And they were most agreeable to saying if we can't raise the money locally, then certainly each of us individually can contribute to Special Olympics through their website, just in case anybody's wondering about that. Okay. All right. So, yeah, Mr. Cooks, did you just raise your hand?
No, I'm good now.
Oh, okay.
No, I was just saying at the executive session afterwards, since we have a short agenda.
Okay.
Councilmember Veracruz has his hand raised.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So does this mean we're not going to put together a fire truck pull team as a council and department directors?
Yeah, I think that's what it means, Mr. Veracruz.
Okay, keep training. We'll get one going here soon. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Now, hey, but Joe, we're prognosticating here that it's not going to happen. Can we lock it down and say yes or no? Probably not, but I think you can pretty well figure that it's not going to happen the way things are going.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So anything else on briefing? Otherwise, we will go into let's see. Suggestion has been made to do executive session afterwards. So we can go into actual city council meeting and do executive session afterwards, if that's okay. If I can just get a head nod, that'll work. Okay. All right. So we will then conclude our briefing session at 7:42, Kristen.
Yes, sir. I got it.
Making a note. And let me get my notes up here. All right. So moving on to the agenda that has been published, we are going to call to order our regular session of our city council of the city of Duncanville, July 21st, the year 2020. Timestamp on convening our regular session of city council will be 7:43. And with that, we need to have an invocation. Councilmember Veracruz, would you do the invocation for us, please?
Yes, sir. I will. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, that each one of us, department directors, council members, our interim city manager, mayor, for a particular reason, Lord, and that is to help walk us through this pandemic and lead our city with all the blessings you've led us to here today. But Lord, more than anything, I thank you that we are able to steward through this, and with you and the Holy Spirit leading the way, Lord, it is possible. Lord, I ask for a hedge of protectiveness for all of our police and fire, our first responders, Lord, and our citizens. And I ask, Lord, you continue to protect our city. In your mighty name, I pray. Amen.
Amen. And moving on, the pledges of allegiance to our flags of our country and of our state. If you would do that with me independently, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 1, reports. The mayor's report. I have 2, maybe 3 items, and they'll be short. I'll be under 3 minutes, I promise. Just to let our citizens know in our entire city. I know some of them are interested in the actions being taken to find our new city manager with our firm that we have hired to do that. We have been advised that today, July the 20th, The advertising for our new city manager, recruitment for our new city manager has gone out on social media, on the airwaves, all over in print. So, and the closing for those individuals that wish to apply for our city manager is August the 21st. So that's an informational item for our citizens. Second item, I want to continue to emphasize to have our citizens please do the census. We are still sitting at under 70%, and we really need to push that up. So if you have any friends, relatives, family that haven't done their census, please do so as quickly as possible. We really need to get that because it's very important in terms of our county and our city receiving monies from the government for that particular purpose. And it also applies to the districting of our county and our state for our representatives in the legislature and in Congress. And the last item, I want to continue to ask our citizens to please take care of themselves in terms of bringing this COVID pandemic to a halt. And all I can do is emphatically reiterate those precautions that CDC is recommending. Number one, wash your hands frequently, disinfect your home, your doorknobs, your steering wheel on your car, your plumbing fixtures, your countertops. Take care of your home. And most important, wear a mask, because that mask is to protect others from anything that you might put out, but at the same time, it protects you from anything someone else might put out. So you wearing a mask is honoring the people that you're around. Them wearing a mask is giving you the respect and honor you deserve to keep from catching COVID-19. Last item, it was just announced later this afternoon that the number of positive cases in Dallas County has dropped 743 today. Judge Jenkins advised mayors this afternoon that we had 18 weeks of 1,000 new cases or better. But today is the first time that we have dropped below 1,000, and it's 743. So hopefully this is an indicator of some positive results in the future. So that concludes my mayor's reports and any council member reports. Mr. Cooks?
Yeah, I'll be very quick as well, Mayor. I echo your sentiment on the census and encourage everyone to please, as you mentioned, please register for that as well. I do have a Zoom meeting coming up this Saturday with the superintendent of Duncanville School, the educational outlook. So that's in college from 10 a.m. to 11:15. So I encourage District 4 and anyone else who would like to attend that as well. That concludes my report.
Okay, Councilmember Jameson.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that on July 17th, that John Lewis died, who was an icon for civil rights. And some good things about him was that he wasn't about popularity, he was about purpose. And he said that it's one people, one family. He was the conscience of the U.S. Congress, and he showed humility, and he was humble, and just want to recognize that was an icon that passed this week. Very important one to our country.
Yes, he is. Thank you. Councilmember McBurnett.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. And I've always been a big proponent about the census, so I wanted to reemphasize that as well. Like you said about the COVID. And also, another death is Alan Powell, was the longtime city member and was one of our first responders, a communications director, and he recently passed as well. So blessings of him and his family and the service he provided for the city and what else he did for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any other inputs from city council members? Okay, seeing none. City manager's report. Paul? Seeing none? All right, thank you. Moving on, item number 2, we have no proclamations and presentations. Item number 3, we're dismissing that. We have no citizens input. Item number 4 on our agenda is the consent agenda. City Secretary, if you please read the consent agenda items.
Item 4A, consider the minutes for the June 8th and June 9th budget workshop special meeting, June 16th city council regular meeting, and the July 7th special meeting. 4B, consider approval of a resolution approving shared use bike lanes, locations, and implementation utilizing the 2018 bond funds for trails. 4C, consider a resolution authorizing award of bid IFC number 20-018 to Alight Stripping LLC for pavement markings for an annual amount to up to $112,409 with annual renewal options, providing for a novation of previous bid award or renewal. 4D, consider a resolution authorizing a purchase agreement with Sam Pax 5-Star Ford Ltd. using the buy board contract number 601-19 in Tarrant County Commissioners Court bid 2019-041 in the amount of up to $142,534.90.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Mayor.
Motion to approve by Mr. McBurnett. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cooks has seconded. City Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Veracruz, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Anderson, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Cooks, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Jameson, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Gordon, 4 are against.
4. Thank you, council. Unanimously approved. Moving on to items for individual consideration. This is item 5A. Consider approval of an ordinance abandoning a portion of Shady Trail Drive known as described, depicted, and authorized in Exhibit A, providing the said ordinance shall constitute a quitclaim deed that may be recorded with the county clerk of Dallas County, Texas. Mr. Ramey, this item is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Who's controlling the slides? There we go. Okay, here we go. So again, this is to talk about the Shady Trail Drive right-of-way abandonment. Next slide, please. So again, the staff's request is that you consider approving the ordinance to abandon a portion of Shady Trail Drive. Next slide, please. So just a little orientation. This is the service center aerial view. The white circles are the Daniel Dale ground storage tanks. And then when you look at the bottom of the map, you'll see the current service center. And then you'll see the yellow rectangle, which marks the service center addition, which is a part of the bond project to renovate the service center. And then the red circle represents the area in question. And if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, that's the actual survey, which was also provided in your packets, highlighting just that small portion of land that would be returned to or be attached to the parcel and abandoned by the city and then attached to the city parcel that's the service center sits on. Next slide, please. So again, the background is as part of this right-of-way abandonment that we followed the process that's already been set down by City Council for right-of-way abandonments. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this from back when we did the Tower Crest property. There was really no notification since, as you saw, the city properties are surround this this right-of-way abandonment. And so really what it boiled down to was we just did the survey that you saw, and now we're coming to council for your consideration. The service center and the surrounding area is actually zoned residential 3.0, and then according to our own zoning ordinance, we have to have a 30-foot setback from city right-of-way for structures. And so by abandoning that little corner of right-of-way, it allows us to achieve the 30-foot standoff for the addition. And again, as I mentioned, the property is surrounded completely by other service center parcels. And again, your approval is the last step in the right-of-way abandonment process. Next slide. So again, our recommendation is that you approve the ordinance abandoning this portion of Shady Trail Drive. Next slide, please. And I'll just turn it over to y'all for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ramey. It appears that it's necessary that this be done if we're going to have the construction that was necessary for the service center. So if there's any discussion, please let me know now. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mayor, I'd like to motion to approve.
Mr. McBurnett has made a motion to approve.
Mark Cook, the second.
Or Mr. Veracruz, I think you were raising your hand to second or comment. I'm not sure. Which is that? Mr. Veracruz?
I'll second if you didn't.
Yeah, just a minute. Mr. Veracruz, can you hear me?
Sir, it's by accident.
Okay, by accident. Okay, so the second by Mr. Cooks, do I have that correct then?
Yes.
All right. So a motion to approve by Mr. McBurnett, second by Mr. Cooks. City Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Veracruz, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Anderson, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Cooks, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Jameson, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Gordon, 4 are against.
4. Thank you, council. The motion is unanimously approved. Moving on to item 5B, consider resolution approving the usage of CARES Act funding and a letter of intent by and between Dallas County, Texas and the city of Duncanville to participate in the Dallas County Emergency Business Assistance Program under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, under the terms and conditions as stated in the letter. Ms. James, this is yours along with Tia Pettis, I believe, and possibly Tonya Hunter. And thank you for the information we received during the briefing session. Continue on, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, this is the action item as we discussed earlier from the briefing section. Next slide, please. As we previously discussed, Duncanville does have the opportunity to recover additional costs incurred from the pandemic. That's an additional $268,440 to cover the employee payroll that wasn't earlier available. In addition, the other 2 items on the slide, you'll see that the city does now have the opportunity, again, as we discussed earlier, to partner with Dallas County for a business as well as a residential assistance program. Next slide, please. Again, this is another slide that we already discussed earlier in terms of the benefits of both of the programs with partnering with Dallas County. It really boils down to the timing and the ability to get assistance for both residential and businesses to them as quickly as possible, and also to ensure additional protection for the city in terms of audit exposure. Next slide, please. Given the time constraints that we discussed, this is the proposed funding allocation that staff is recommending, as we talked about earlier. And again, for those individuals who are just tuning in, you'll see that we are proposing approximately 32% of the $2.173 million to be allocated towards mitigating the city expenses occurred. And then the 1.47 would be for business assistance, which is approximately the 68%. Residential assistance would be provided by Dallas County. So next slide, please. This is actually the resolution that you have before you, Mayor and Council, with the blanks that need to be filled in. Kind of recapping on what we discussed earlier and what staff is proposing. We are proposing, and obviously Council, we're asking for direction from you all in terms of what you would like to do so that we can move this usage plan forward to Dallas County, because again, we're not able to have access to that 80% of funding until we provide them with a usage plan that they will approve. So with that being said, we would recommend that $703,050 would be aimed towards mitigating city expenses. B would be 1.47 million, and that would go towards a partnership with Dallas County for business assistance. Again, the residential assistance will come directly from Dallas County. And C would be approval letter of intent between Dallas County, Texas, and the city of Duncanville to participate in the Dallas County Emergency Business Assistance Program under the CARES Act. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mayor, I move to approve the resolution approving the usage of the CARES Act funding and a letter of intent by and between Dallas County, Texas, and the city of Duncanville to participate in the Dallas County Emergency Business Assistance Program under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, CARES Act, under the terms and conditions as stated in the letter.
I still have a question.
Thank you. Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Mayor, I'd like to second it.
We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Jameson and a second by Mayor Pro Tem McBurnett. Discussion, Mr. Cooks.
Yes. Is there any way, Mayor, I know you mentioned that in the background that there was some information from the county about the residential assistance. Was there any percentages talked about, any dollar amount talked about? I mean, just to rely on saying that they're going to help Duncanville residents without giving us something to work with. I mean, that just concerns me. We went from $829,000 that could help our residential assistance program to a question mark on we don't know how much. So I love the program. I think it's great, especially for the utilities, but I wish they would have provided us with some directions on percentage or something to know that the residents of Duncanville will get something from this as well. So is there any way we can get that, Jessica?
We can reach out to the county, Mr. Cooks, but I do not believe that they have a percent, if you will, for each individual community within their county. I did go back and look at the website information, and it is not a lottery system for the residential program. So it looks as if when residents apply, that's how it will be determined. But again, with the calculations that they've used and the research that they've done, Dallas County has assured us that they have money available to assist Dallas County residents, which would be Duncanville residents, and through December. But no, I do not have a percentage. We could reach out to them and ask them. I doubt that they will have that, but that would be something we could do.
Yeah, because if they did all that calculation and realized that, hey, they could take care of the Duncanville residents, and I'm only talking about the Duncanville residents, if they could take care of the Duncanville residents, then they had to have some dollar amount in mind or percentage in mind of how it will look. So I would like to hear that back as well.
Jessica, I believe that the county does have a dollar amount, breaking it out by percentage of what they expect by city. I'm not sure they have that, but they do have an extended dollar amount that's available. And I think Mr. Reed might be able to get that for us, but we can get that.
I'd like to say something. And when we were talking about it earlier, when they had the prerequisites of the median income and the different things that you have to qualify, then obviously they've looked at, because our median income, I don't remember, was that for Dallas, the first amount, and the second amount was like 82 for Dallas and 63 for Duncanville. Then
right.
they already probably have done the figures to know the percentage of people that would qualify in Duncanville. Now then, I guess the only thing I would wonder is the resident then needs to apply for the funding. So if they don't apply for it, then
right,
they don't get it. But the benefit also was that by Dallas County doing it, they get their water bill, and without them doing it, they don't. And we have already been watching the water situation, in that now it's going to switch into cutoff mode because of people getting behind on their water bills. So that's a positive, that they'll have help there. And, because they were so explicit in their prerequisites to qualify, I would assume that they already had a working idea of how much Duncanville, if everybody that qualified applied, how much they would need to come up with for our city.
Yeah, Ms. Jameson, your numbers are correct. It was 82,100, the median income for Dallas, and 53,220 for the city of Duncanville. So using those baseline median incomes, they can use some statistical extrapolation to come up with some dollars and some percentages. So Tia or Jessica both will be in contact with county and get back with us some information with us. Just want to make sure everybody understands that on that previous slide, the $2 amounts are going to be inserted on page 1 of page 3 of the resolution 2020-059. But Jessica or Tia, on exhibit A that's in our packet, I know Duncanville is going to be on that first line. The dollar amount in the second line, is that going to be, well, what's that dollar amount going to, is that, let's see, what dollar amount's going to be inserted in that particular line in exhibit A?
Just 1 minute, Mayor. It should be for the business, that would be the amount. Here, just 1 minute, please.
Mayor, in Exhibit A, that is going to be the 1.47 million for the business assistance program.
That is correct.
Okay, very good. Very good. Okay. All right. We have concluded our discussion. We do have a motion to approve. So, City Secretary, please take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Vera Cruz, for or against? 4. Mayor Pro Tem Mac Burnett, for or against?
4,
Councilmember Anderson, for or against? Councilmember Anderson, for or against?
4.
Councilmember Cooks, for or against?
4.
Councilmember Jameson, for or against?
4.
Mayor Gordon, for or against?
4. Thank you, City Council. We have unanimous approval of that motion. Okay, at this particular point in time, we will move into executive session. Just
Mayor, we have the staff and board reports. If we can get through those and then.
Yep, I always do that. I'm sorry, Paul. I was just following the agenda as we went here. Okay.
No problem.
So we'll take 5C later, and moving on to item number 6, staff and board reports. City council members, we were provided all these quarterly reports ahead of time, and the presumption is that we had ample opportunity to review those. Do want to jump into item C. Chief Brown is going to go into detail on his quarterly report on the use of force. But for the quarterly financial report and the quarterly fire department report, we did not intend for those to be briefed individually, that you would have read through them. If you have any questions, the responsible parties, either Mr. Summerlin or Chief Rohde, would be available to answer any questions on those 2 quarterly reports. So at this time, I'll just take a moment. Any questions on the monthly financial report for Mr. Summerlin? Okay, seeing none. Any questions for Chief Rohde on the fire department quarterly report? Thank you. So that takes care of items 6A and 6B. Item 6C, we will move into the police department quarterly report and the police department's use of force presentation, and Chief Brown.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Mayor and Council, I'm going to provide you with an overview of the Duncanville Police Department's use of force policy. So, Kristen, if you would go down to slide 22, please. Continue a couple more slides there, Kristen. It begins with the Duncanville Police Department use of force discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Duncanville Police Department's use of force policy. Next slide, please. There are 3 particular areas that I would like to discuss this evening. The first one is policy development, just some highlights from our policy. And then I want to briefly talk about 8 Can't Wait campaign. And Mayor and Council, this policy discussion was requested by Councilmember Mark Cooks. Next slide, please. Policies make sure that law enforcement agencies comply with laws, industry standards, and case law. Also, our policies promote police accountability, and it helps police departments build trust in the communities they serve. Basically, it's like a compass that directs our officers towards optimal safety and professionalism. And one of the things that I'm extremely proud of is that our police department is a recognized department through the Texas Police Chief's Best Practices program. The Best Practices program has 186 best practices for Texas law enforcement agencies. And these best practices were carefully developed by Texas law enforcement professionals to assist agencies in the efficiency and effective delivery of service and the protection of all of our citizens. We were first recognized in 2016, and we recently went through what it's called the recertification program, where we have outside assessors from the Texas Police Chiefs Association come in and evaluate or reevaluate, if you will, policies. If you recall, Mayor and Council, each month we present a city manager report, and that report lists the number of use of force incidents, the number of police pursuits that we have during that period, as well as internal and external complaints. And we also list any disciplinary action that's taken. And our use of force authority is derived from Chapter 9 of the Texas Penal Code. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. So when we look at our policy highlights, I want to mention that our use of force policy was recently updated, and it was updated on June the 8th of this year. And there are several changes that we made. Chokeholds and the carotid artery neck restraints are prohibited. We specifically listed this in our policy update. We also listed the duty to intervene and stop excessive force by another officer. That is specifically listed in our updated policy. And officers may only use force that appears reasonably necessary to effectively bring the incident under control. And the next bullet point is use of unnecessary force will not be tolerated. And the next bullet point says the level of cause or justification for using any force on a free citizen is the objective reasonableness standard of the Fourth Amendment. In other words, what we're saying from this particular court case is that the officer's actions must be judged on a reasonable officer's actions under similar circumstances. Once the officer recognizes that force justification has changed, the officer must reassess force application to a reasonable objective choice. It's simply what that means is that when the person stops resisting, the force needs to decrease. And every use of force action is reviewed by our personnel and training unit and the officer's chain of command. And the reason we do that is we want to ensure that our officers are the use of force is in compliance with our departmental policies and with law. And officers involved in the use of force, deadly force rather, will be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of that investigation. So essentially, these are just highlights from our use of force policy. Next slide. So in June of this year, in response to the killing of George Floyd, Campaign Zero launched 8 Can't Wait, a database that tracks how 8 policies to curtail police violence are employed in police agencies across the nation. And so I want to go over those specific 8 policies, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. The first policy from this organization is ban chokeholds and strangleholds. And as I just indicated, the Duncanville Police Department has a written directive that prohibits the use of chokeholds and carotid artery restraints. And when I began my law enforcement career back in the 80s, the chokehold was actually taught in the police academy. And that tells you how far this profession has evolved. We no longer teach those types of restraints. The next bullet point, it says require de-escalation. And de-escalation, as well as training on the concept of implicit bias, are part of our ongoing training program. This training is generated during the basic police academy, and additional training is provided after the officers graduate from the police academy. Bullet point number 3, require warning shots in situations where an officer reasonably believes a person will cause imminent death or serious bodily injury. If not immediately apprehended, the officer should, when feasible, identify themselves and give a verbal warning that deadly force may be used. Now, there are times when, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to be able to provide warning before we use deadly force. The next bullet point is exhaust all means before shooting. And this is really important. The men and women of the Duncanville Police Department prioritize the sanctity of life. We're going to do everything in our power not to use deadly force. If we have to use what is referred to as less lethal, we will certainly do that. Next bullet point. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. The duty to intervene and stop excessive force by other officers. Again, extremely important. As I just indicated, our policy has been updated, and we make it very clear to the men and women of the Duncanville Police Department that you have a duty to intervene regardless of the race, regardless of the ethnicity of the individual. Those things obviously do not matter. We are going to stop excessive force in the event that happens, and we have a duty to do so. Next bullet point is ban shootings at moving vehicles. Not banned, officers should move out of the path of approaching vehicles. The practice is only allowed when they also reasonably believe there are no other reasonable means available to avert the threat of the moving vehicle, or if deadly force other than the vehicle is directed at an officer or others. We do not shoot at a vehicle in an attempt to disable it. And then the next bullet point is the use of force continuum. Essentially what this means, Mayor and Council, is that there are different levels of force, and the amount of force is used based on or is dictated based on the actions of the individual that the officer is encountering. And so we do not have, or we do not actually use a force continuum. The officer has the ability to use whatever amount of force is considered reasonable under the circumstances. And then the last bullet point is require comprehensive reporting each time an officer uses force. Again, this is extremely important. Anytime an officer uses force, that force must be documented. Reports are then submitted up the chain of command. It is reviewed by our personnel and training unit, and that recommendation from the personnel and training unit is then provided to the assistant chief and I. He and I then review the use of force to ensure that it meets or it's within the guidelines of our policies and procedures. And so, Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you may have. And again, thank you for the opportunity to discuss our use of force policy.
Thank you, Chief Brown. We appreciate all that you and Assistant Chief Lavigny do in the training and oversight of our entire police force. And being briefed on these items gives us greater strength of understanding how it is that our police officers operate. And I will add that each week in our weekly report given to us by the city manager, if there is any incident of use of deadly force or threatened force, I know that you indicate those to us so that you are not trying to withhold anything from us as information from us as council members or even citizens, and that you do indicate that those incidents are investigated and found to be acceptable or unacceptable. So that's transparency, and that's the integrity of our police force that we very much do appreciate. So thanks to you and Chief Lavigny and all the officers for all that you're doing. So any questions for Chief Brown? Councilmember Jameson.
Could you go back to the last page? The slide. Next one. Oh, wait, no, that's it. Ban shooting at moving vehicles. The practice is only allowed when the officer reasonably believes there are no other reasonable means available to avert the threat of the moving vehicle, or if deadly force other than the vehicle is directed at the officer. I'm just curious, when would it be allowed?
Let me give you an example. Let's say that we're investigating an incident and a vehicle is being used to assault an officer, and the only way that that officer feels he can stop the threat is to shoot at that vehicle. Under those circumstances, it would be permitted.
Only if the vehicle is coming at the officer.
Yes, ma'am. The officer feels that that vehicle is being used as an assault, and he or she feels that their life is being threatened.
Okay. I was curious because I couldn't, it's hard to imagine. I would think that the best thing to do is get the license plate number. So
Okay.
the police can get them.
They're the
That's
police.
all.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Cooks.
Yeah, Chief, I want to thank you very much for your presentation today, and I appreciate you informing us. But it wasn't just for us as council. I've gotten questions from citizens who wanted for us to display this information. So thank you for being very transparent, as you always are, to us and really to citizens as well as you display this information. So thank you very much, and to all of the police officers as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other inputs or questions for Chief Brown? Mr. McBurnett, I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear you.
All right.
There you go.
Chief, I want to thank you and the department for what you do. Y'all do run a fine department. You're ahead of the curve on these things, and you're obviously recognized. So again, thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you, sir.
I think we all agree. I think the whole council agrees that we're glad you're in charge.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to serve alongside the men and women of the Duncanville Police Department. I'm honored to be their police chief.
And I will say that the chief, I'm listening to a Zoom call that all of the chiefs of police in the Southwest was on a panel, and Chief Brown certainly stood out amongst his peers. Not that they were doing a great job, but I was very proud to hear Chief Brown and all of the things he participated with to talk about the things that Duncanville was doing right. So again, Chief, thank you for representing our city, not only inside of Duncanville, but outside of Duncanville.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief and Council. And so at this time, we're going to move into executive session. And I will read as required what we're going to be doing in executive session. I'm reading from our agenda. Item number 1, City Council shall convene it to close executive session pursuant to section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code. Deliberation regarding economic development negotiations.
Yes, sir.
Somebody is open on their mic. Would they please mute? Thank you. All right. Sub-item number 1, to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the governmental body has received from a business prospect that the governmental body seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the governmental body, and with which the governmental body is conducting economic development negotiations. Or 2, to deliberate the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect described by subdivision parens 1. Regarding, to wit, real properties generally located north of Wheatland Road, east of Cedar Ridge, west of Cockrell Hill Road, and south of Redbird Lane. So we're going to recess City Council, and the timestamp on that is 8:29. At 8:29, we are recessing. City Council members, please go to your link to go to executive session. Okay, we are all here from what I see. So timestamp on reconvening City Council is 10:02 p.m. And going to item one on the agenda. Item 5C. Item 5C, it says take any necessary action as a result of executive session, and there is no action to be taken as a result of the executive session. Thank you very much. And with that,
Mayor,
yep, what? Hello?
just real quick, so
Yeah.
before I have to send an email, I will be out of town next week. Not as a result of this, but I will be out of town next week. For planned vacation, Chief Brown will be acting. So,
That starts Friday, right?
yes.
Okay.
Where are you going?
Going to Florida. Everybody else is there.
Ooh, that's scary.
I'll wear a mask.
Have you seen the weather reports for Florida?
Oh,
There's go to the emergency, the SOC thing that we get for weather alerts.
yes.
Flooding in Florida with a Caribbean storm coming up.
I can't wait.
And
Where-
do
where
not bring
this-
back the virus.
I will try not
This
to.
mask and a snorkel.
Yeah,
For life.
I will.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it. It's been a long night, but a very productive and positive night. Thank you very much. We are adjourning at 10:03 p.m. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Goodbye.